So tonight you'll see it is a webinar format, so that we have disabled the chat, but at the on your screen you should be able to see a place where you can put in questions and we will answer them. Dr. Roy has said that you can answer as we go along, but some of those we may hold off until the end. So I'll get started to introduce myself and we'll still give people a chance to get in. So my name is Michelle Watson. I'm the Volunteer Engagement Coordinator Supervisor here at NAMI, New Hampshire. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the New Hampshire office. We provide education, support, and advocacy for Granite Staters impacted by mental illness and suicide. We are so thrilled to be able to offer this webinar to you tonight. We were chatting ahead of time, and it seems like these 2 weeks since the holidays have been very challenging, hectic for everyone. And so I think you'll really be pleased for this webinar. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Roy. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and a trauma expert who has the privilege to live and work had the privilege to work and live on 3 different continents. She now lives in Exeter, New Hampshire with her small family, 3 children, I'm not quite sure is small, and owns her own private practice. Dr. Roy sees a small number of clients and families, but the bulk of her work is in working to change the mental health care system here in New Hampshire and beyond. This work involves training and consultations with schools, hospitals, mental health care agencies, and other first responders to raise awareness and create a common language about the way we all treat mental health issues. Dr. Roy is particularly passionate about working with adolescents and their grown-ups, as well as supporting caregivers across the state. Outside of work, Dr. Roy enjoys being with her young family, hiking and training for her next ultramarathon. And we've had the privilege to have Dr. Roy with us on a couple of other webinars, as well as sessions for our annual conference, which I do want to put a plug in for. The NAMI New Hampshire annual conference will be virtual again this year. It will start the evening of March 26th for our keynote presentation, and then a full day on March 27th. So please save the dates. We hope to open registration at the beginning of February. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Roy.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so happy to be back with NAMI. It's an organization that is definitely near and dear to my heart. And so I'm always so happy to be able to come back and work with you all. So today hi everybody. I hope you're someplace comfortable and able to take this hour to really be self-care. We're going to talk about all the ways to help regulate that stressed brain of ours. And hopefully there's maybe some things you've heard before and it's validation that you're doing the right things for your brain. Maybe it's things or strategies you haven't heard before, and it will give you some new things to add to that self-care library that you have. I wanted to start off by saying actually that that word self-care, I always hesitate to use it, is because I feel like we're told self-care, self-care, self-care. And a lot of what that is, or what's been told to us, or what we've kind of digested as self-care ideas before, are things that take a lot of time or take ourselves away from our family or our job, and they're just not possible to get into our busy schedules. And so I really wanted to take a real good look at what self-care truly was a couple years ago, because it's so very critical to our staying mentally well for ourselves and for the others that are in our lives. And so hopefully tonight you get some strategies that will what I'm passionate about is giving you these strategies that aren't going to take any time, that are ways to adjust your thinking, adjust practices, build things into your day-to-day lives that are really going to help to what we like to call regulate your brain. And so we're going to start here. And this concept actually comes from a documentary I watched about, like Michelle said in my introduction, I'm an ultra runner. Ultra running is running any race that's longer than a marathon. And both my husband and I are ultra runners, actually. And so, as you can probably imagine, the training for one of those races is pretty significant. Right now, we're in the heat of training again, and we're each training about 2 hours a day. And so, it takes a lot to have the ability to be self-reflective and think about this word selfish. And this documentary kind of said, selfish isn't a bad thing. It's gotten this bad connotation in our world, in our culture. But being selfish is necessary. You have to take that time to take care of yourself, in order to be there for the other people, for yourself, but also for the other people in your lives that really need you to be regulated. It's different than self-centered. Self-centered is when you're only focused on yourself. You're only caring about yourself. And so I want us to think about tonight taking some time to be selfish, and to be a good role model for those that might be watching us, to take care of ourselves. It's necessary. So we are going to start with the brain. If you've ever heard me speak before, I am a giant brain nerd. I love understanding the science behind why we feel the way we do. Right, my job is to deal in feelings. I'm a psychologist, and I like to know the brain science behind it. So, what does it actually look like or mean when we're feeling like we're losing our minds? When we feel like we're really stressed or hectic or crazy. And some of the signs that we maybe need to take care or do some of these strategies we're going to talk about tonight. Not sleeping. That's a big tip off if your sleep is becoming really disruptive or if you're sleeping too much. So, watching our sleeping patterns, watching our eating patterns. Some of us, when we get really stressed, we stop eating. We don't feel our hunger or satiation cues. We're gonna see why that is in a minute. Or we might eat to self-soothe. We might start eating more. We might not have patience. We might lose the front part of our brain, our frontal lobe. And what that looks like is we can't concentrate, we can't focus, we feel like we're scattered, right? That scattered brain feeling. We might have little impulse control. So maybe we find ourselves snapping at our spouse or partner or our kiddos, or a colleague. We just don't feel ourselves. We also might feel really low mood or anxious or really angry a lot of the time. So we're going to see some of how all of this fits in to what's going on in our brains at a very kind of neuronal level when we start to get stressed. So our brains have a certain amount of stress that they can maintain or hold on to before we start to go into this fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? Not all stress is a bad thing. We need a little bit of stress in our lives to help to motivate us, push us outside of our comfort zone, right? This is what we learn, in school, as tests and quizzes are just enough of that stress to get us to really learn and develop and grow. It's when we get into that toxic stress zone, that our brain can be tipped into this fight, flight, or freeze mode. And we're familiar with that in popular culture, survival brain, right? So our brain's only meant to be in this survival mode for a very short amount of time, for like a burst in actual life-threatening situations. It's not meant to stay there. When our brain stays there, our body feels the repercussions from that. So what's actually going on? Our amygdala, which is a tiny structure in our brain, tiny but mighty. It's our little smoke detector. Its job is to make sure that nothing in our physical environment or our mental environment is out to harm us, hurt us, scare us, even big emotions like excitement. If big exciting changes, transitions are happening, our amygdala is going to respond to all of that. So it's reading our environment, it's taking in information from our five senses. So, is there a smell that's off? This is why when we smell smoke, our brain immediately starts to go, whoops, something's going on, right? That's a smell that tips us off to that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Well, the amygdala unfortunately responds to lots of things. It's very sensitive. I say unfortunately, but we do want it to be this way, right? This is the tiny little structure that keeps us alive, that puts us into this fight, flight, or freeze mode, that helps us survive. It's just not helpful when it's responding to day-to-day stressors. So when you've had a really busy week at work, maybe one of your kiddos, you get a call from the school, they're not doing so well, or you feel strapped for time for buying healthy meals or cooking healthy meals. It's all those little day-to-day stressors. Our amygdala will start to respond to those. It also responds to our thoughts. So if you think things like, man, I don't have it this week, what's wrong with me? If you start to go down those negative thoughts, your amygdala is going to start to respond to that as well. And what it does is it activates our what I call the red brain, that bottom part of our brain that's for survival, for action. It says, all right, there's something's going on here. This person's super stressed. I'm going to put all my neuronal activity, blood flow, all that kind of neuronal activity down to this bottom part of our brain. And I'm going to shut off activity in the higher order thinking parts of our brain. So this is why when you're really in that stressful moment, sometimes you have a hard time thinking clearly, writing your own phone number, remembering your own kid's birthday. I feel like when I'm put on the spot, two of my kids have birthdays that are 2 days apart. And so I'm like, oh, which one are you asking about? I don't really know. And so your brain gets very quickly in the zone of not being able to think clearly. And I've seen the brain scans. It's fascinating to watch just the neuronal activity stop in the top part of your brain and just really focus on breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, all those things that are purely for survival. So memory processes start to shift. So the way we remember things, our ability to remember things really starts to shift. So that's why if you're really stressed, you might feel like you're not remembering things. You have to write a lot of lists. We have to have a lot of cues. We lose access to our words. So our ability to use language to describe what's going on for us. So that's why if you've ever been in an argument or a fight and you feel like you're just not expressing yourself well, it's because again, your brain's really preserving all the energy that it normally has to send to areas like language centers or feeling centers or impulse control. It really takes all that energy and sends it right down to that survival part of our brain. Again, helpful if you're being chased by a bear, right? If you've ever heard me speak again, this is the universally scary situation I use because I feel like there's not many humans on this planet that would be totally relaxed if they were being chased by a bear. So, again, you want this system to work for you in a survival situation. But when you're trying to live your day to day life and it's just a little bit too stressful, this system causes certain things to happen. So, this is our stress response system we're talking about, our fight, flight, or freeze stress response system. So one way of looking at this, I find to be really easily understood, digestible, is the polyvagal theory of the stress response system. And I think we've popped some resources in there for you, or if you even just Google this polyvagal theory, lots of information will come up. So what it talks about, and this is Stephen Porges' theory, this is certainly not mine. I want to give him credit for this. But what this theory talks about is when we're at rest, we call it rest and digest. When we're calm, when we're not stressed, when we're having a great day and we feel like work's manageable, our kiddos are just flowing, or our spouse or partner and you are communicating, you're in this optimal zone of arousal, this middle section right here, this window of tolerance. All of what this means really is all of our brain and body activity is at rest. So our heart rate is at, 60 to 70 beats per minute. Our blood pressure where it's supposed to be. We feel like we can take a deep breath, we can think clearly, we can be playful and laugh. These are all signs that we're not stressed, right? It's really hard to do some of these things if we're really stressed. We call it rest and digest because you can literally digest your food well, right? Our stomach is very implicated by the stress response process. And that's why we get, upset stomach, nervous tummy, all those kind of things when we feel really stressed. As soon as our amygdala says, "Oop, there's something going on here," as soon as we have these, what we're going to call doses of stress happening, moments of stress, we get shot either up into hyper arousal, which is at the top, or we get pushed down into hypo arousal. So these are kind of two ways our body and brain respond to stress. You have the capacity, we all have the capacity to have either or response, either and response, really. And it's likely kind of personality based. So some of us, as I talk about these two zones, you might go, oh, I'm definitely a hyper aroused person, but my spouse, they're definitely a hypo aroused person, or my kiddos. Or you might say it's situationally based. Work stress sends me right down into hypo arousal, but family stress sends me right up right to the top. So sometimes it's trigger based, sometimes or situationally based, sometimes it's just who you are and it's combo of all the things in both. And so hyper arousal at the top looks a lot like anxiety and anger. So it's when all of our body systems are sped up, we're releasing adrenaline and cortisol. Our heart rate's going to go very, our heart's going to beat very fast. Our blood pressure is going to go up. We feel like we need to get some energy out, and you really actually do. So you have all this cortisol and adrenaline. You're going to feel like you want to slam a door or yell or punch a wall or something. Most of us adults have the impulse control and brain development to not punch a hole in the wall. Although we've all had those moments, right? I'm saying I'm a door slammer. I'm raising a family of door slammers. But we feel that rush of just like, frustration. That's that hyper aroused response. That's fight or flight. So, quite literally, what your brain and body is getting ready to do is to fight something off, this stressor off, or run away from it, retreat from it. The other way we go is that bottom section, that hypoarousal. So that's when actually the body says something's up. I'm going to slow everything down and kind of, it's almost like hibernation mode. And so it exists to kind of survive that way. So animals that go into hypoarousal are flight animals. So animals that tend to run away, hide, hunker down, put their head in the sand. So hyperarousal actually looks a lot like depression, not wanting to engage with others. You kind of shut down. You may not want to get out of bed. You may avoid activities. You may procrastinate at work because the stress is just too much. And so we actually shut down. So these are the two ways, again, that we can go. And likely you go both ways at some point in your life, or with depending on the stressor again. Um, but why I mention this is because I like to give validation to why you're feeling the way you're feeling, right? There's a lot of biochemical stuff happening behind the scenes when we're stressed. That's why we feel fatigue. We might feel sick. We might actually get sick more often, right? Our body's working very hard to maintain this system that's usually only meant to be used in a snap second of survival. And so I think it's validating. The other reason I bring this up is we want to regulate or use self care strategies that match where we are on this polyvagal ladder, as we call it. So if you're hyper aroused, you have to do something to regulate yourself to get that adrenaline and cortisol to move out of your system. So exercise is a great body movement of some kind, or physical manipulation with your hands, making something is a great way to come down from a hyperarousal response. Actually, another great way is crying. Believe it or not, research shows that crying releases a ton of cortisol, and cortisol is that stress hormone that builds up in our body. So sometimes I tell people, have a playlist ready to go that you know is guaranteed to make you cry, or a movie. The Notebook for a lot of people is that movie, but have some things ready to go to help that stress cycle kind of move along. Another resource we popped in was the book called Burnout. They talk a lot about how we as a society have moved away from leaning into this stress cycle, and we try to avoid it, right? Like, think about our popular culture. The you're in line at the grocery store, that how's it going? You're like, yeah, it's good. It's good. Even if your right leg's on fire, right? We do this thing, we're like, we're fine, we're good. So we've done a lot of suppressing of our stress cycle to kind of get through our day to day. And actually, research shows we need to lean into it. We need to allow ourselves to cry, to feel, to express, to kind of release some of these biochemicals that are happening. I actually had a client that I had go to a rage room. If you haven't been to it's called Bent, the one in Portsmouth. If you haven't been to one of those, I highly recommend it. They basically put you in a room in a fully protective suit with a helmet and a face shield, and give you lots of fun weapons to just smash stuff. And man, is it a good way to release some cortisol and adrenaline. And it's really fun. So anything like that. So what I want to kind of talk about now before we get into the strategies, last kind of upfront information is we have to kind of, and this is a first strategy in and of itself, is observe, indulge, accept. So I want you to really, after tonight, you have some homework. I'm going to tell you a couple different things you have for homework, is to really observe your doses of stress that you have in your life. This is pretty powerful. If you do nothing else after tonight differently, I hope you do this. So just think about the doses of stress and which ones you can control completely, meaning get rid of, which ones you can minimize, and which ones you have to radically accept they are what they are and they will exist. And I have to figure out how to do some self-care strategies to make sure that those doses of stress that I cannot control are not adding up in my body. And so I'll give you an example. I'm a mom of three. My kids are 10, 8, and almost 7 now. And every morning in my household is absolutely a chaotic stress mess. And I can do things to help that go better, minimize, right? I can pack lunches the night before, I can lay out clothes, I can do all these things. Sometimes I'll be honest, I don't because I'm tired at night and I don't do it. And I just know there are times I have to radically accept that the time between when my kids wake up and when I get them on the bus at 8:15 is just a race to the finish. And so I know that after they get on that bus or after I get in my car to go to work, I have to do something small to help minimize that dose of stress to keep myself within that window of tolerance. So our goal every day is to recognize how many doses of stress we're getting, where it pushes us along this continuum, and how do I get in these very small doses of calm in order to get that regulatory diet of self-care. Now, doesn't mean that you need to get a massage every day, although that would be lovely to maintain these natural doses of stress. Their research shows that you only need 3 minutes of regulation if you're doing well matched, well placed brain regulation or calming or self care strategies. It only needs to be 3 minutes. Much shorter, as short as 20 seconds, if you're doing it with another person. So hugging, for example, we're going to talk about that in a minute. That is a great self care strategy, and it's been shown to lower cortisol levels pretty quickly. So let's go there right now. So again, just the takeaway from the, oops, I'm going all over the place. Now I can't back up. There we go. So the takeaway from this slide is really look at your doses of stress. Which ones can you minimize? Which ones can you not get rid of completely, but need to, just do some calm or self-care for, and which ones maybe you can get rid of. So I'll give you another quick example from my own life. The news is very stressful. As we know, it's full of lots of stressful things happening in our world. I work with stress for a living. I take on people's stories. I love it. This is what I do. I'm passionate about it. And I know by the time I get home from work, I'm pretty tapped out as far as my doses of stress. So watching the news is not something that's something I've gotten rid of. That's a dose of stress I've left behind. And what I've done, and this is unique to me, but my husband doesn't seem to be bothered by the stress in the world at all. And so he ingests the news. And then I ask him, is there anything I need to know that so I don't look like I live under a rock? And so he kind of regurgitates a very simplified, less stressful version for me. But that's something I've really done for myself because it's just taking in too much. And sometimes social media falls in that category as well. Taking in too much of that was really, I found, agitating my stress response system. And it was often happening right before bed. And we're going to talk about that too. So the first thing I want us to think about or do, and this comes from an article, it was actually in the New York Times, and Michelle, it's another article I could have given you right off the bat, but maybe you can find it for us. It's a school teacher who is talking about some research that she did around, talking with her students around, do you just need to be helped, heard, or hugged? And sometimes that's the best place to start when we're thinking about self-care. A lot of the times, and this is what she found in this article, it's really a beautiful article, is that most people just need to be hugged. And what we jump to as humans is fixing and problem solving. And that's because, quite honestly, that's what our brain likes. Our brain likes black and white. It likes to problem solve. It likes to be in control. It doesn't like ambiguous. It doesn't like unknown, uncertainty. And so really slowing things down when we're stressed and just thinking, what do I truly need right now? And how do I get that in the least amount of time possible? 20-second hug is what research says is what you need in order to, again, lower adrenaline, lower cortisol levels, lower blood pressure. And it doesn't sound like much, but if you've ever been in a 20-second hug before, it's a long time. But that's what it's shown to be helpful. So just think right off the bat, if you're getting escalated and your spouse or partner is starting to get, right, because we tend, unfortunately, polyvagal systems wise, they cue into each other. So oftentimes, if I start to get escalated, people that are close to me, like my husband or my kiddos, will also start to have a polyvagal response because our brains are connected in that way, especially around cortisol levels. So we often have very similar cortisol levels to the people that we spend the most time with, like our family members, or for kiddos, whoever's in their classroom or their classroom teacher. Those cortisol levels often tend to correspond. So sometimes when we get stuck in this, taking a pause and saying, I actually think we just need to hug right now. And I always say to the parents of my teenagers, it's like hugging a cactus sometimes. Man, they're prickly and they are not inviting of those hugs, but do they ever need it? Another beautiful book, Nobody Hugs a Cactus. It's a great read. It's a children's book, but I think everyone should have a copy in their homes because it's a good reminder. When we're most prickly is when we need a hug. Okay, here's the next strategy. So thinking about, what do I need in this moment? How do I slow things down? How do I kind of stop or reflect on my stress cycle right now? The next thing you can do, and it's really a focus of mine, it's been something when I read about it, I've really, really taken it into. Michelle can kind of testify to this. She hears me talking about this all the time. Language, the way we talk about ourselves, our world, and the people in it is a strategy to de-escalate our stress response system that takes absolutely zero time, right? It's all about what's happening up here and how we reflect on our world. And so I want to start this kind of section off with this quote by Michael Lewis, pretty famous American author. I heard him being interviewed on NPR, and he said he was talking about language, and I just loved this quote. Is one of the most important things we do every day is tell ourselves a story about ourselves, and our world and the people in it. And I just thought it was such a beautiful way to introduce this concept of, if we switch that language a little bit. And I'm going to give you some very easy strategies of how to try to do that. It really does change the way we see the world and our place in it. So this was a really beautiful NPR interview that happened. This happens sometimes. I'll be listening to NPR in my car and I have to pull over to the side of the road because I have to take notes because it's just too good. Or sometimes I'm able to go back and find it after, but it's safer if I just pull over and take notes. So notice the words you use to describe yourself, your character, your situation, the situations you're in, your history, right? This is so important that we describe our history in a validating, empathetic way. What we've been through impacts us today, and that's okay. We all have this path that we've been on, and every experience that we've had has helped to mold who we are today. And validating that's really, really important. So just some ways, some language cues that help us to calm. And so I try to give ways to hear certain words, or so that you're able to kind of make these slow adjustments. This has taken years for me to get to this point of really being able to use language. And there are days that I'm not able to do it, right? When I'm really, really stressed, sometimes I'm not able to do it. But really some switches that have happened, replacing the shoulds with coulds. So you're gonna now, every time you say the word should or hear the word should, you're gonna think of this webinar, and I'm not sorry about that. I am not sorry about that. So what shoulds do is it really sets ourselves and other people in our world up for unrealistic expectations. That person should have been there for me. Instead of saying a person could have been there for me and they weren't, and they were probably doing the best they could in that moment, right? This concept of, we are all doing the best that we can and we can all do better, I just think is such a beautiful concept. So that leads us into I'll skip down, one of the other language switches I've made, and you'll hear me do it constantly throughout this webinar probably, is replacing but with and. What this really does is allow two seemingly opposite concepts to exist, sometimes emotions even, to exist at the same time. Again, we have to kind of push our brains in this direction because our brains like to be either or, black, white. They like these very simple, very pronounced categories. And our brain does not like living in that gray, living in that in between of How can I both love and hate someone? How can I love you and hold you accountable and have these boundaries? How can we be friends and I can tell you that you really hurt my feelings? So being able to balance these two very opposite concepts. And I'll just give a quick example and how this pops up in my life, and I'm able to think about it and really reflect on it. So last year in July, I was supposed to run the Vermont 100-mile race. And as you can probably imagine, you train for a very long time. You visualize yourself, right? There's so much mental and physical training that goes into running 100 miles. And about 2 to 3 days before the race, I don't know if you remember this or not. I was in July. Vermont had horrific flooding, just horrific. But people lost their homes, people lost their businesses, and the race course was mostly underwater, and so they had to cancel the race. And so I was obviously devastated, very, very sad. And it was really difficult for me to hold the emotion of being sad and disappointed and also feeling for those families that had lost. It was really hard to realize that those two could exist at the same time. And I didn't need to have shame about it. I didn't need to go to people that were, asking me about the race and say, oh, but at least I'm safe. At least, we do these at least statements. It was okay for me to say, yeah, I am really disappointed and I feel for those families. And both of those things can be true at the same time. So again, as I'm talking about this, getting rid of those at least statements in your life, we do these for ourselves, right? To minimize, and we also do it for others, and we do it for all the best reasons. We do it just to help people feel better. Yes, but at least you still have this. Instead of saying, wow, that sounds really hard, and leaving it at that. Or I don't know what that's like. Help me understand, and leaving it at that. And I know Michelle's going to pop a video in as well. It's empathy. It's Brene Brown talking. It's also, if you Google Brene Brown and empathy, or search on YouTube, it will come right up. It's a beautiful way of looking at how to have some more self empathy, but also empathy for others. And you can even feel, as we're talking about this, how it just slowly de-escalates that stress response. And the last one is really being able to reflect on judgments, and assumptions, and replacing it with curiosity, which you heard me do a little bit right there. But just to kind of focus on this last one, I will never tell you to get rid of judgments and assumptions. We all have them. We have them for very good reasons. They're also part of our survival brain part, right? Of making quick judgments and assumptions to evaluate our situation and keep us safe. What I will ask you to do is reflect on those judgment and assumptions. So when you make a judgment, say, "Ooh, that was a judgment. Do I need to," evaluating and thinking about it. So let me give you a quick example of how this came up for me, or continues to come up for me in my life. Road rage. So maybe you pull out and the person behind you thinks you cut them off and they're gesturing, yelling, swearing, flipping the bird, whatever they're doing. Your first judgment or assumption is, and I pause on purpose because everyone's thinking right now what they would think in that moment. What a jerk. And maybe use more colorful language. I probably would if I wasn't on a webinar right now. But you instantly go to that place of what a jerk. And then if you continue with that judgment or assumption, you go up the chain of, I can't believe he's flipping this, and you can feel your stress response system taking over. Versus if you say, oh, what a jerk, because we do, it's natural, right? Again, I'm not going to tell you get rid of that. And then reflect on that and think, what else could be going on for that person? I do this all the time in my life. I just think, what else could be going on for that person that is causing their own stress response system to be activated? And I don't need to be pulled into that. So maybe the person that's super angry with you in the road rage situation has just found out that their spouse or partner is at the hospital. Maybe they got a phone call from school that their kiddo is sick. Maybe they just got laid off or fired. Maybe they just got a bad email. Maybe nothing happened at all and they truly are not a kind person. You will never know. That's the really beautiful part. You will never know. So you can err on the side of, I wonder what else is going on for that person, and go down that kind of story of their world, as far as you want to go, to really de-escalate that stress response you're having within yourself. Okay, so here are some strategies that are some take time, some do not. But again, I guarantee most of these are part of your life already. But again, 3 minutes. So the focus is 3 minutes. That's all we need to really regulate our system. This is the Healthy Mind Platter. This is a creation of Dan Siegel's, which Dan Siegel, if you're a parent, if you're out there listening and you are a parent, Dan Siegel's books are amazing and wonderful. And anything, or if you're not in, don't have time to read a book, I get that. They're available on Audible, or he has pretty quick little YouTube things you can watch. And I just find him, again, to be someone that I really respect and like his work. So he made this a healthy mind platter in response to the food pyramid. He said, if we have a food pyramid, why don't we have a mind pyramid, essentially? And so um, we're going to go through each of these pretty quickly, but just to kind of, and hopefully I'll, like most of these, I imagine you're thinking, yeah, I know this already. So I'm hoping to give you little tips that maybe you didn't think about under each of these categories. Sleep, so incredibly important. I always tell people I had to take an entire course on sleep in my graduate program, if that gives you any indication of how important it is to our mental health. And we know this, we know it's good to have good routines, all the things around sleep. But what I want to mention is in relation to what we're talking about, a couple things. One, only sleeping in your bed, not scrolling, not watching TV, not working on your laptop, because there's pretty solid research to show our brain associates physical spaces with awake levels in our brain. And so, if we spend a lot of time awake doing work or on the phone in our bed, our brain thinks this is a place we do work. This is not a place we sleep. This is incredibly important. If any of you have teenagers or young adults, they tend to spend a lot of time in bed languishing and watching their YouTube and TikTok and everything else. And so, really encouraging them to even get a beanbag on their floor. It's not that they can't be in their room, it's that they need to be out of that physical space of their bed. And then the other thing I will say about sleep in relation to the stress response system is making sure you give yourself a buffer between your last dose of stress, if you can, and the time when you're trying to fall asleep. An hour is ideal. I know that sounds like a long time. This is one I'm still working on. I'm not great in practice. But our little devices tend to bring lots of unknown doses of stress or kind of unexpected doses of stress. Even just scrolling through social media and seeing some political ad that really stresses you out, or seeing a post from someone that really, agitates you. There's all these little landmines that you could step on with these little devices. So I really encourage people. It's not even about the blue screen anymore. It's more about what could this bring to my brain, to the forefront of my brain before I'm trying to fall asleep. So really giving yourself that buffer, and within that buffer, giving yourself some dose of regulation, so some dose of self-care, whether it's enjoying a cup of tea, having a conversation, reading a book. So doing something, watching mindless TV. I'm not saying you can't watch mindless TV. British Bake Off is one of my favorite things to watch before bed, but really something that's not going to agitate that stress response system. All right, physical activity. I'm not going to spend a long time on this. We know this. We know this to be true. There's such solid research out there. Cornell just released a study about not only physical activity, but doing it in nature. And nature does not need to be the deep woods of New Hampshire. It could be your backyard. It could be a deck with a few plants on it. But being active in nature of some kind, only 10 to 15 minutes is needed to really completely reset your adrenaline and cortisol levels, your blood pressure, your heart rate, all that stuff. And so, yes, getting outside, taking your dog for a walk, like I said, a lot of this is already in your normal routine. I also don't care if you spend 3 minutes swaying in your living room. All you need is some sort of rhythmic, repetitive motion to really get the benefits of regulation. And why this is true, physical activity is actually the number one way to help to de-stress our brains, because our brain, the red brain, the fight, flight, or freeze brain that's online when we're stressed, doesn't speak the English language or any other language. It speaks the language of physical movement and regulation of rhythmic and repetitive movement. So drumming, they found drumming was one of the most helpful things. Jumping, walking, running, any of these, swimming, any of these repetitive motions, yoga, again, swaying, um, because that's what really causes those neurons in the bottom part of our brain to light up and reactivate. It's again fascinating to watch on brain scans, but that's why this truly works. Focus time. One of my favorites is just giving yourself one task to do that you are guaranteed to complete in less 15 minutes or less. Because what we do is we want to feel less stressed, feel more organized. So we say, I'm going to clean out my whole closet. And what usually ends up happening is we're not successful. It causes more stress. And it's not something that's going to regulate us. So picking one thing, I was talking before you all came on about my kitchen island is a disaster usually. And so that's the one thing I clean up. Oh, actually, that was at a meeting earlier today. It was the one thing I try to clean up every day just to give me something that I feel like I physically can see I'm successfully completed. Unloading the dishwasher, reloading the dishwasher, something like that. It seems so simple, but it really does help give our brain that, oh, okay, I have control over something. If you really want to tackle a bigger task like cleaning out your closet, give yourself, chunk it. So give yourself one thing to focus on at a time. I'm going to look through my long sleeve shirts and decide which ones to get rid of, not your whole closet, one article of clothing and get rid of. I'm going to focus on organizing my shoes. So one simple task. Okay, last one before we get to the relationship piece, I think. Yes. So time in is another one I really want to just highlight quickly is really what it is healthy dissociation. It's allowing our brain to kind of check out for a very short period of time from the outside world because our brain needs that break too, right? When we get home from work, we take off our work clothes, we put on our comfy clothes, we take that deep breath. That's like our kind of giving ourselves that chance to have a break. Our brain needs that too. So we feel this when we get lost in a really good book and the world could be falling down around you and you're so into this book. Again, watching mindless television, playing video games. Some of us as adults still love to play video games and still play, right? I love old school Mario Kart still. It's great. But giving our brain that kind of, I'm going to avoid thinking about what's out there for this short amount of time to give my brain that break to kind of reset and be able to come back with some more energy. The one thing we don't want to do with that one is spend too much time. So like binge watching Netflix for hours and hours, because then that will often cause a rebound stress, right? Sometimes okay. If it's a rainy Sunday and you've got your family and your jams on, go for it. But just make sure it's not causing more stress. And the last thing that was on there was relax time, play, and spending time with others. And those can all certainly be combined. And why this is so powerful is because our brain has this fourth F. It has fight, flight, freeze, or flock. And it really, what it speaks to is our brain's ability to connect with other humans in order to help them to regulate or have them help us to regulate. And so we do this through mirror neurons, and there's ways to do this with intent. And again, don't think about these big chunks of time. Focus on these little meaningful moments where you are able to laugh with your family, spend 3 to 5 minutes doing some activity together, get down on the floor and play, have a snowball fight, go sledding, right? It's these activities that really engage that subconscious, playful part of our brains that still needs to be engaged. And it's really hard to be stressed when we're being playful. So think about times when you can connect during your day, whether it's in, first thing when you wake up, can you have a cup of coffee? Can you have a cup of coffee with your spouse or partner? Is there a time in the middle of the day where you can sit and have even a quick 5 minute, conversation with your colleague, right? We call them hallway conversations. We catch each other. How's the day going? Those little brain check-ins. Is there something at night where you can just do these quick little meaningful connections with intent without screens? And I know this sounds too simple to be true, but it's hard. It's hard to really even take these very small little intentional moments to connect with each other. And while you're doing those connections, talk about the 50-50 myth. This is actually from Brene Brown. It was on her podcast. She talks about this. I love this concept. of how we always say relationships are 50-50. Well, guess what? Almost no relationship at any given point is 50-50 because we don't always have 50% in us. And so this is another practice my husband and I have started doing. Every once in a while, we don't do it every day anymore, but when we can tell each other's off, we kind of say, what do you got today for a percentage? And I might say, I only have 10% today. I'm burnt, I'm tapped out. And he may say, okay, I've got the other 90%, no problem. He may say, uh-oh, I only have 10% too. So finding ways to really connect on that, realize you're teetering on that edge of your window of tolerance. How do you call in help? Do you get help from your kids? All right, kiddos, mom and dad need you to put your laundry away because we just don't have it today. Or we're going to go out to dinner. So enlisting grace givers. So allowing yourself to have these grace, what I call grace givers, this list of things that you can kind of turn to, people, things, activities you can turn to help relieve some of that stress and up your percentage point. Going out to dinner or getting takeout is a great example, right? We tend to beat ourselves up if we do that too many times. And what's too many times? It's, giving your kids the same dinner 3 nights a week. It used to be something that I was really stringent about. And now I'm like, you know what? It's been a busy week. If they're eating and they're healthy and they're happy, then keep the kids alive. That was what we always say. Keep the kids alive and happy. And sometimes it's using Ziploc bags. If you've ever heard me talk before, you've heard me talk about how I know Ziploc bags are terrible for the environment. And sometimes I just can't search for another tiny snack container. So using Ziploc bags is that grace giver. The key is not beating yourself up after using a grace giver. So allowing yourself to have these things you call in off your bench, right? Deepening your bench, having these things you call in or people you call in, and being able to feel like there's no guilt or shame around that, that you're doing this to self-care, to relieve that stress response you're having. Couple more slides. This concept comes from an article where they were interviewing the famous author, and I'm gonna blank on her name right now. It's not Nora Roberts. There it is. I always want to say Nora Jones, but she's the famous singer. So Nora Roberts, the author. And they asked her, how do you do it? You're a mom, you're a famous author. How do you do it all? And she said, it's about juggling. Now, this is your next homework assignment. And truly, I mean that because I did this for myself when I read this article. And it was really powerful. She talks about juggling plastic versus glass balls. And you have to kind of think about what truly are your glass balls, meaning what are those things you have to keep in the air no matter what. And I guarantee the first time you start to write down your plastic versus glass balls, you're going to have a ton of glass balls. And you're going to realize this is not sustainable. I cannot keep all these things in the air at once without dropping something and having it smash into a million pieces. Whereas the plastic balls, you can drop those all you want. They bounce, they roll, they're right there to pick back up again and keep on going when you're ready. So when I started doing this, I started whittling down my glass balls. My glass balls are the health and wellness of my family. That's pretty much it. And everything else I can drop. And that sounds extreme. My career, right? Just being on time, which is absolutely a bugaboo for me. I don't like not being on time. And yet there are times when prioritizing the health and wellness of my family gets prioritized over being on time. For those of you who watch Bluey, and if you don't watch Bluey, even if you do not have children, you should absolutely watch Bluey. It's a great show. And there's so many good just moments on that show, but there's an episode about daddy drop off. And it's all about spending time connecting and being a little bit late for school drop off. And it can't happen every day, but there are times when that happens and we drop that plastic ball. And guess what? The next day you just pick it up and keep on going. So really reflecting on what are truly my glass balls, how many of those can I truly have in the air, and what can I give myself the grace to really say this is actually a plastic ball. So thinking about those. Okay, this one's for our brains that like control, our brains that like to problem solve. Well, guess what? Not every problem can be solved, but there are 4 solutions to every problem in the world, I promise. And these are the 4 solutions. So sometimes when we're really stressed, it's helpful to give our brain these only 4 options, right? Sometimes when we're stressed, our brain goes to all the deep, dark places and thinks of all the options, even if they are not helpful in that moment. It's called catastrophizing, right? We go to that place of just catastrophizing everything that's happening. So this can kind of stop that in its tracks. So what can I control in this moment? Can I solve this problem? Maybe the answer is yes. But most likely the answer is no. Lots of the things that stress us out are not easily solved. So, can I change the way I feel about this problem and the emotions I'm having about it right now? Or do I need to radically accept it is what it is? Being late and being stuck in traffic is one of those things until we have go gadget cars, right? Where we can like walk over other cars or do really like hover or do fly. We are stuck and we have to radically accept. There's some things you can do, right? You can call work or call if you're late for an appointment, you can call and say, I'm running 5 minutes late. I'm very sorry. Do you still want me to come? Do you want me to reschedule? And then you have to radically accept that you are going to be late. And then you always have the option, above all else, to sit in a difficult emotion for as long as you want. And teenagers are great at this. And I always, so when I'm working with a teenager, I always say these 4 things. And I'm like, okay, so we're choosing to be miserable right now. And they get all like, oh, I'm not choosing to be, but it's okay. It's okay. And you need to validate it and allow that for yourself because you're choosing. It's a choice you're making, and you're giving your brain control over saying, I am going to be sad and I'm going to choose to be sad right now. Or I'm going to be angry and I'm going to choose to be angry until I decide I'm ready to move on. And then those other 3 options are available for you. The last point here, I think the last point, yes, pretty much the last point is vulnerability and leaning into vulnerability. And if you want to know more about vulnerability from the absolute expert, Brene Brown started her career in researching vulnerability. She's a well-known author now and podcast host, but this is where she really started, and she does some beautiful work on vulnerability. So being able to really lean into emotions, showing other people your real life, not your social media life. It's really liberating, which is what our brain needs. When we're stressed, we tend to become very rigid. We need to liberate our brain with vulnerability, with play, with allowing some of these, just to be a little bit looser. Also, part of vulnerability is apologizing. And learning how to accept an apology. This is something I've really been working on with my own kids, and you'll hear them do it now, which is great. Is instead of saying it's okay when someone apologizes, to say thank you for apologizing. It's okay minimizes what happened to you. Saying thank you for apologizing is recognizing that person has made an attempt to repair the relationship, which is what really at the heart of it is what apologizing is a repairing of a rupture in a relationship. It's not making it okay that whatever happened happened. It's making it a connection point in a relationship. And all of these things you can see just slowly start to bring that stress level down or allow our brains to see, this other side of calm. So along those lines, in this world where we are so very divided, as a country, as a culture, as a society, right? More and more, it's so important to focus on, to boil down when you're in those stressful, heated moments. Don't focus on being right or getting your point across. Focus on human connection. Human connection is so powerful in regulating our brains. And if we allow ourselves to be connected in that moment and de-escalate, this is what I often tell the parents that I'm working with of teenagers. Yes, they're so frustrating in that moment, and they broke some sort of rule or they stayed out past curfew. And if you go at it red brain to red brain, you're not going to get anywhere. So connection first, get the full brain to relax and calm, and then talk about consequences after. So, recap. Hopefully, you see that there was heavy on the side of things that don't take any time at all, right? Language switches, checking in with those important people in your life about the 50-50 myth, looking at some grace givers, looking at how you juggle your plastic and glass balls, giving your brain those 4 easy options when it becomes really stressed or overwhelmed, leaning into some vulnerability, and the things that do take time. Remember, I'm talking 3 minutes to be effective. As long as you're getting that kind of healthy diet or doses of calm along the way. So just takeaways from tonight, I hope, really reflect on what your doses of stress are, really reflect on your regular self-care diet. How do you get some more time in? Is it listening to a certain artist on your way to work, right? Noah Khan right now is everything for me. I love his music. He makes me feel so happy and regulated. And so finding ways to kind of just insert these very small changes into your life that will hopefully add up. You can bank calm. So if you really spend a lot of time, that's why vacations are so good, right? We have this week off, we go on this, stress free or stress less week. And we come back feeling like, okay, I've got a couple weeks in me of regulation. You can bank that calm, and if you're getting these regular 3 minute doses of things, it can really add up and sustain you. And the last thing I will say, if you're gonna try something from tonight, pick one thing at a time to try, one new strategy, one new shift in your just one, right? That's the other thing we tend to do. We want to go all in, right? This is what January is all about. We're going to go all in with exercise, all in with the diet. Just pick one thing. It's more sustainable. And then when you've mastered that, pick another thing to try until you build this library of resources. And I know that some resources have been shared. Please don't hesitate to find me on my website, on my social media. Reach out to me, email me with any questions after tonight. And I know I can talk forever, so I know I don't have a ton of time, but is there any questions out there, any good questions out there that would be helpful to answer, you think, Michelle?
There are. So one of the
Ooh,
first ones was, can you repeat the 4 things from the slide on control?
yes. You can solve some problems, right? Some problems are solvable. You can change the way you feel about the problem. So if you're finding you're feeling a lot of jealousy, maybe switch to acceptance. I find that a lot. If I find I'm feeling harboring some feelings towards another human, I'm thinking about that's their truth. That's their, I'm not going to spend any energy on that. That's for them to, so changing the way you feel about something, radically accepting that you are in a situation, it is what it is, and telling your brain, you know what, it is what it is, and I'm okay with that right now. And then the last one is choosing to stay and really lean into that emotion, even if it's a negative emotion or what we consider to be a negative emotion.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
The next question is, what's your opinion on social media potentially contributing to stress and anxiety? And I know you could probably do an entire webinar
I
on
have.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. It's interesting. So so Social Dilemma, great documentary, but one I like even better is called Like. I don't know if it's widely available. I think it's only available for educational purposes, but what they talked about on Like, and they gave a more balanced view, which is what I liked about it, is they talked about, creating an online community is not necessarily a bad thing, but there are bad things in it. And so we just have to learn again how to be kind of a discerning consumer about what we're digesting and really look at it with a lens of this is social media life, this is not real life. And giving yourselves breaks from it. So it's not all bad. It's a great way to connect. When I lived overseas, it was everything for me of ways to connect with family and keep up to date. But you have to give yourself breaks. You have to be able to look at it with a lens of this is a very, filtered life, right? Of a better way of putting it. And just to kind of figure out how much of a dose of social media is too much of a dose for me, and we're all different. So I highly recommend putting on your phone, or most phones have it, some amount of how much screen time have I had, how much time have I spent on Facebook, and really, even journaling about it for a week. Okay, I spent this much time a day on Facebook or Instagram. Did I see a shift in my mood? What if I lower it? What if it goes up? So just really reflecting on what is that level for you that's going to maintain a healthy level.
Well, and I just wanted to tag on to that answer
Yeah.
and question. When you were talking about the bed and bedroom should be for
Yes.
sleep, and
Yes.
especially for teenagers. So how do you
Yes.
convince them when they don't want to listen to us anyway?
Yes.
How do we convince them not to do that? Are there
So
certain
hard.
strategies?
Yeah. I'm a big proponent, a big advocate of no phones at night. And guess what? We need to be better as adults at doing it too. So anything you're going to implement with your teens at home, you have to do yourself. Sorry, you just have to do it. It's truly not fair. If you're saying this isn't good for your brain and yet you're doing it. So, just making it so that's a family strategy of not having access to phones at night. And I try to talk to them around boundaries, with themselves and with their friends around nothing good is I always say to my teenagers, listen, nothing good's happening at 2 a.m. Nothing's good. And if your friend is in trouble, they need to have adults that they can reach out to. So helping them understand it's okay to have the healthy boundary of telling your friends, I'm not going to be accessible in the middle of the night. So, this is not something that as soon as 6 a.m. or whatever it is, 5 a.m. Some kids need to get up really early. Comes around, I will answer all your text messages. But we've really created a society, and adults are not immune to this, where we are so responsive, we're over responsive, and we have terrible boundaries about emailing each other and texting each other, and so sometimes just even making people aware in your life, putting up away messages. Our phones have that ability, right? I can't answer right now. I don't answer my phone between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. or whatever it is. So just trying to have some good boundaries around it for yourself and role modeling that for your kids and helping them see that they can create those boundaries with their peers as well. Easier said than done, I know. It's
Yeah.
hard.
No, those were great. Thank you.
Yeah.
One question and then lots of thank yous. Um,
Okay.
the question is, what if you don't feel better after you exercise?
Yes.
What
So
should you do?
absolutely. And so that's why I said you have to really match your regulation strategy with whatever's going on for you, stress level wise or hypoarousal, biochemical wise. Some of us need those endorphins to feel better in the moment. Some of us don't respond as well to that, right? All of our brain chemicals are different. I'll say a couple things. You might actually feel better brain chemistry wise. So you might not feel better yourself. You might feel kind of like tired and sore and not feel so good. But your brain chemical situation might be better. The other thing I will say is if that doesn't work, reflect on what was really stressing you and then it didn't work. Okay, maybe I need something more like a yoga. Maybe I need something more like meditation. And on the flip side, I found for myself, meditation isn't something that is easily doesn't work for me. I hate to say it doesn't work for me. It's not an all or nothing. It's not, I'm not practiced in it. And so it's not as effective for me. So you want to find those things that are as salient and effective in a short amount of time as possible for you. So you might be someone that needs human connection over exercise because maybe you need oxytocin to be released instead of endorphins. So you just kind of need to figure out what's going to work for you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's something that it's not an all or nothing. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. And forgive
Yeah.
ourselves, right? When it doesn't work, it's
It
okay.
doesn't work. Yeah. And that's okay too. Yes.
So we have, thank you. This is helpful. Just wanted to say this was amazingly helpful
Oh,
presentation. Thank you
good.
so much. Thank you so much. This was so informative. I took many photos of your slides.
Oh,
These are
good.
simple yet effective tips that I can actually see using, which is so, this is why I wanted to bring you here
Yes.
tonight because I felt the same when I saw you before. Thank you so very much for this. Yes, and the other question was, will we get an email with the recording? Yes, we will send out an email with the recording from tonight.
Yes.
As well as hopefully I will get an evaluation tucked into that email as well.
Oh,
But
great.
I will
Yes.
forgive myself too for the
Yeah.
being delayed.
Yes.
So I want to make one other announcement, and I had put the link to a flyer that I want to talk about up too early. So I don't know, Michelle, if you can have access to this. It's a new event for NAMI New Hampshire that we're bringing to us. It's called This Is My Brave. It's a storytelling show that aims to dispel the stigma around surrounding mental illness and substance use disorder, which is on May 15th in Concord. And this program, we bring in cast members, people like you, to share their personal stories, and signups are open for this. For This Is My Brave auditions. You can find more information about that on our website and on social media. But we're really excited about that, as well as the conference on May 26th and 27th.
Yeah,
So, Dr. Roy, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really
of course.
appreciate you taking the time. And I just love this, different type of self-care. So
Good.
thank you all for being here with us
Thank
tonight. It's,
you.
it's a busy week and
Yes.
it's nighttime. And so we're appreciative of your time as well.